Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Welcome to 10 Days of Festive Fear 2024, and we are on day number 4, and I have 2 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from October the 16th, 2024, and story number 1 comes from Sarah. I'm sensitive, always have been, as is my mum and nana, so I have always sensed spirits, get weird vibes about places, and can read people in minutes, whether they're genuine or fake. More of an empath, if you will. Listening to the woman in the bay window story reminded me of an experience I had, which I'll get to. My first experience was when I was about 6. My mum and I lived with my grandparents in our arts and crafts era house in Blackrock, County Dublin. I heard an old woman telling me to get out of my room coming from the old air vent. I later found out that the previous owner before my grandmother bought the house, an old woman, had died and was in the house a few days before she was found by her sons. She must have stuck around, as you'd hear footsteps coming down the stairs at night, and sometimes the tall, heavy teak door to the dining room would open up on its own, brass handle turning and all. It was always a bit spooky, and I hated being upstairs on my own. Fast forward to when I was 12, living on the other side of the country in Galway. My nana had passed when I was 6 and my grandfather passed the year I turned 12, so the house went on the market. Mum was doing a last check of the house before handing the keys to the estate agent for the new owner, and I decided to stay in the car as I was bored. I noticed our neighbour, Mrs. L, coming to her bay window on the other side of Nana's semi-detached house. She was dressed in a fluffy robe and looked like she had woken up from an afternoon nap. She locked eyes with me and just kept staring at me for what felt like hours, but in reality it was about 5 to 7 minutes, before slowly walking back into her room after I gave her a wide-eyed, head-bobbing, "What the hell are you staring at?" look. When Mum got back into the car, I told her Mrs. L was acting weird and staring me out of it, to which Mum replied, "Don't be silly. Mrs. L died 3 months ago. There's nobody in the house." Fast forward. Through my experiences, another notable one was when I was at a concert with an old college friend. I stayed at her parents' house guest room that night instead of going back to my now husband in Galway late at night. I was just about to drift off, in that place between consciousness and unconsciousness, when I heard a young guy whisper in my ear, "She was raped." I jolted upright to find nobody in my room and the house still and as quiet as a morgue. I thought nothing of it and drifted back to sleep. It stuck with me because it sort of echoed in the room. It stuck with me so much that I asked her if her house ever had anything strange happen or if the property was old. She knew I was sensitive, so she said, "No, why?" I shrugged it off and said it didn't matter. "Why, Sarah?" she demanded, so I told her. She immediately burst into tears and told me she was. But the only person she ever told was a male friend of hers, who had died of cancer. Fast forward to COVID lockdowns. I was pregnant with my son and exhausted in my first trimester, where all you want to do is sleep. Same as before, one evening I went for an early night and I heard a voice. But it wasn't speaking. It was a very long, drawn-out wail, as if in slow motion. The weird thing was that while hearing it, I felt emotion. I felt desperately sad. I opened my eyes and jumped up again. It was once again like the previous time, echoing in the room. I can't describe anything other than it sounded like the banshee. 3 months later, both my stepdad and father-in-law died a day apart, both with ancient Irish surnames. The banshee is known to forewarn the deaths of people in ancient Irish families. The last thing that happened to me was when we were scattering my stepdad's ashes around Skellig Michael. The hotel we stayed in Valencia Island nearby had been there a couple of centuries. I was returning to our room from upstairs to my room when I caught sight of a maid peeking around the corner. She was very tall and awfully gaunt, a very neat bun on her head and a lace maid's cap on her head. The thing was that she was almost fully transparent. I looked away quickly and back, but she was gone. I went in and told my husband, laughing it off, and thought no more of it. It was only the next morning my mum said, "Well, I saw a ghost in my room last night." I looked at my husband with wide eyes. I hadn't told her about my experience. She described the same girl, but she walked slowly through Mum's room from one wall into the opposite wall. Being sensitive, I had this impression that she remained there, as she was in love with a superior staff member from her time, and that's where her happiest memories are. Please, the woman's voice coming from the air vent. Oh no, that's terrifying. Imagine you're 6 years old lying in bed and you hear the voice of an old woman coming from the feckin' air vent. And then you realise that the previous owner had died in the house and there's footsteps on the stairs and heavy doors opening on their own. Ooh, the voice in the air vent might be one of the worst things I've heard in a really long time. And again, I know I bring it up all the time, but it brings me right back to that episode of The Simpsons where Bart's evil twin is living in the attic and he sees him in the air vent. And it really scared me. And your bit about seeing Mrs. L next door is so similar to the woman in the bay window. Like, so similar. And I wonder if anyone else has seen Mrs. L in the bay window since she passed away, or was it just you? And I would like to point out that we have talked loads on this podcast about exploding head syndrome, which is something that I get when I'm particularly tired. It's a neurological thing where just as you're about to fall asleep, somebody will shout in your ear, or sometimes people hear like gunshots or loud music. But with exploding head syndrome, it is like instantaneous. It is like a single second, a moment of loud noise. At least that's what it is for me anyway. But this sounds like it was a prolonged thing, like hearing the man whisper she was raped in your ear, and it sort of echoed around the room. And I wonder if, because this, you know, obviously happened again when you heard that long, sorrowful banshee-like wail. I wonder if it's that space between being asleep and awake allows you to be more susceptible to these things. When I was a teenager, one of my favourite books was a book called Stargirl, which I actually always forget that I have a tattoo of on my ribs, and I never remember that it's there. But one of my favourite books was a book called Stargirl, and in it there's a gorgeous description about that moment between being waking and asleep, when you wake up and you're not fully awake and you're not fully asleep, and it's described as being like our most primal state of being. And I wonder if that's why you had those experiences in that primal state of being, that you are more susceptible, you are more open, your brain is more vulnerable, you are less defended. And look, your last story, I'm sorry to say it, is just horrific. Just horrific. Seeing a transparent maid with a lace cap who's really gaunt, peeking around the corner and then disappearing. Stop it. And if I was hearing your ma the next morning being like, "Oh, I saw the same figure walking through my room," I think I'd burst into tears there and then, just start crying uncontrollably.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Holiday shopping is here, and Amazon Live has got you covered. Shop for the perfect gift from the comfort of your home with Amazon Live's shoppable video experience. Discover the hottest products from influencers and shop while you watch. This season, join Candy Burris from Real Housewives in her holiday Amazon Live series, Generation Face Off, where Candy, her mom, Mama Joyce, and daughter Riley share their favorite stocking stuffers and go-to gifts across fashion, beauty, and more. Watch and shop new episodes of Candy's series Generation Face Off now by going to amazon.com/candylive. That's amazon.com/candylive. For a limited time, use promo code CANDYLIVE for $5 off an eligible product featured on the first episode of the series. That's KANDILIVE. Promotion expires on December 25th, 2024. Limited supply of goods. Terms and conditions apply. For full promotion terms and conditions, go to amazon.com/candyterms.
Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code HOLIDAY. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code HOLIDAY. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. And an extra $30 off with promo code HOLIDAY. Minimum purchase may apply.
E-invoicing with Pagero. It's a cold world when your financial system is isolated from your trading partners. Invoices need to travel the winding, error-ridden road of email and manual input. Step out of the cold, friend. Connect to the Pagero network to exchange e-invoices and other supply chain documents with millions of businesses globally. Business is better connected with Pagero. Visit Pagero.com to start your automation journey.
And story number 2 comes from Jess. I was one of those spooky children that seemed to be able to sense things that weren't actually visible. But honestly, for the most part, I kept it to myself and tried to ignore it. The house I grew up in was a new build, so shouldn't have had any lingering haunts or spooks. But I remember as a little girl, I never wanted to be alone in that house, and always felt like something was watching me around a corner. Well, fast forward to when I was about 11 years old and my mom decided I was old enough to be left alone for a few minutes while she ran a quick errand down the street. I was sitting in the living room watching TV with our dog Buster when I heard footsteps above my head through the ceiling. Possessed with bravery that I certainly do not have anymore, I brought the dog with me and we went upstairs to investigate. My dad was at work, my brother was at baseball practice, and obviously my mom had gone out, so there was no one else in the house. It sounded like it was coming from my parents' bedroom, so we crept up the stairs, and when I got to the top, I slowly peeked my head around the door frame to the right to look in. There was nothing, except the TV in their bedroom was on, and it was just static. Buster, who was afraid of his own shadow, started growling, and the hair on his back went up. He looked to the left of the TV past their bed, and so did I. Again, there was nothing there, but I was just overcome with this feeling that there was something mean in the room, and it was not happy that we had noticed it. So we noped out of there real fast and went and sat outside on the front steps until my mom came home. When she got home and saw me sitting there, she was a bit confused and asked what was wrong. I said, "Charlie's inside and I don't like him." Naturally, my mom went into the "what the fuck did you just say" mode and calmly told me to wait outside with the dog, and she went in to look around and found nothing. Many years later, when I brought this up, she said she was terrified when I said that, and assumed some creepy man had broken in, but she couldn't find anything. Then her brain went to, oh hell no, did she see a ghost in here? I think she said she told whatever it was to get the hell out and it couldn't stay. And I don't know why, but I picture him as this older man with white hair and a big nose with a cigar and sort of rumpled older clothing. Just felt mean as hell. I don't have any other vivid memories of other encounters with Charlie, thankfully. Oh, and no, I have no idea where I got the name Charlie from. I come from a decently sized Irish-American family. My mom is the eldest of 5 daughters, and there are 11 cousins on that side. I didn't get to know this side of my family until I was about 12 years old due to some long drawn-out drama from before my time. When I was 17, me, my parents, and my friend Jen and I were on a beach vacation in the Outer Banks in July. One evening we were all hanging around the house and getting ready to go for dinner, when all of a sudden I heard a massive car crash sound that stopped me in my tracks. I went outside to look around, but didn't see any obvious signs of a crash. We were just a few streets away from the main road where it could have happened, but I just remember it sounding so loud in my head. My mom and I sort of shared a look, but then we went on with our day. An hour later, my mum got a call that my cousin Craig had died tragically in an accident. He was riding his motorcycle and was struck by someone driving a car under the influence. Years later, when a few of my cousins and aunts were all talking about that day, we realised something odd. A bunch of us had all had something happen the moment he died. I heard what sounded like an accident, and came to find out that so did my mom. My cousin Kate's favourite necklace broke for no reason. My younger cousin Ryan's favourite toy car got stuck in a VCR, and so on. Obviously this was extremely traumatic for the entire family, and something that will stay with me forever. Experiencing that level of grief and at that age had a huge impact on me as a person, and truthfully I did not handle it well for a long time. About a month after his funeral, I moved a couple of hours away to college in York, Pennsylvania. Along with being a dumb college freshman, I was grieving, away from home for the first time, and in general not doing well. I was drinking way too heavily, having mood swings and finding it hard to relate to my friends and classmates, and I was just angry all the time. Early in the second semester, it must have been January or February, I had stayed in on a Friday night because I had to work practicum hours the next day for my major, which meant I had to do free labour, and in this case that was being a referee for a college volleyball tournament, and you do not want to be hungover while doing that. So I was getting a rare night of actual sleep, when I had the most vivid dream that I will remember until I die. In my dream I saw Craig. He was in a hospital bed, hooked up to a bunch of things. His leg was in a cast and being held up, but he was conscious, and honestly could have looked a lot worse. I don't remember the entire conversation we had, but I do remember that he told me, "Jess, I'm okay. I'm getting better here. I will heal and I'm at peace. You have to do the same. Tell my mom I'm okay and go and live your life." And truthfully, from that day on, I started getting better. I was more open with my friends about how bad I was doing. I talked to a former field hockey coach who was a school counsellor and got some good advice. And I finally started letting myself process things. A year after his death, the family all met up in New Jersey, where he was from and had died, and were staying with his parents for a weekend for a 1-year memorial service and fundraising 5k. My aunt and uncle had a pool at that house, so naturally all the cousins were excited to have some fun at a rare time when we were all together. My cousin Nicole and I ducked into one of the bedrooms to get changed. I don't actually remember which one, but it could have been Craig's. One thing you should know is that in his life, Craig was a prankster. He kept everyone on their toes and made sure people didn't take life too seriously. So Nicole and I were changing, and I see the bedroom door start to open slowly. I quickly walk over and close the door and keep changing. It happens again. Nicole and I share a look, and I close the door again. A moment later, it opens again, so I say out loud, "Craig, cut it out, we're trying to get changed," and close the door again. And the door stays closed. Nicole and I look at each other and chuckle and roll our eyes and go on. I don't have any other stories with Craig that I can think of, other than the fact that I see a red-tailed hawk regularly, and always when I go on a long road trip. And I like to think that's him saying hello and keeping an eye on me. I even got a tattoo of a hawk for him. I can't explain the dream, and I don't try too hard to make sense of it. Sure, it could have been my subconscious working out a way to help me make peace with something tragic. Or maybe it was Craig telling me to get my shit together. Either way, I'm thankful. And as for a lot of our family all experiencing something weird at the same time that he died, I've no idea what to say there. Something like that happened a few other times. My brother was in a car accident and injured pretty seriously, and I got violently ill at the exact same time. My mom and I will think of each other and one will call the other. My best friend and I will do the same thing, or just inherently know when something is wrong and pick up the phone. My mom's side of the family has always called this having the fae. I have never heard it called that anywhere else, and obviously am more familiar with the common definition of fae or fairies. I'm curious if you or anyone else has ever heard of this. I have memories going all the way back of being a kid, and I do something spooky and my mom goes, "Oh, Nana Mary would say you have the fae." Apparently, Nana Mary used to say that onions were the cure to most ailments, so who knows. My last story from me today, but I thought you could use a classic creepy hotel tale. A couple of years ago, my boyfriend at the time, Derek, and I decided to go away for a little weekend together, and decided to visit this town a couple of hours away in southern Indiana, called French Lick. Yes, that is the real name. It has something to do with buffalo licking rocks. No, I can't actually explain it. In French Lick, there are these two big hotel resorts, one called French Lick and the other called West Baden, both of which were built during the Gilded Age and really are a sight to see. West Baden is a bit fancier, and on our budget at the time, we decided to stay at French Lick, which is still really nice and very much gives vibes of the Stanley Hotel. So after a day of walking around doing touristy things, we finally settled in for bed in our room. Somehow we had ended up with a larger than usual sort of corner room at the end of a hallway. As I mentioned earlier, I'd spent most of my adolescence and adulthood suppressing any sort of gift I may have because I just couldn't handle it. But being in this hotel in general always had me a little on edge. Like I fully expected to see the girls from The Shining at any moment. So I couldn't tell if it was our room in particular that had my spidey senses going, or if it was just the vibe in general. Needless to say, it took me a while to calm down and get close to being able to fall asleep, where of course Derek passed out within 30 seconds. Right when I was about to fall asleep, I had a bout of exploding head syndrome, which completely woke me up. But then I started hearing what sounded like kids running around a hotel staircase right through the wall that the head of our bed was against. Not super loud, but loud enough for me to think, that's odd, and it's a bit late for all that. Then I heard what sounded like a kid or someone sort of dragging their hand against the wall as they walked by. I rolled over slightly to see if my boyfriend was still asleep through all of this, and of course he was. I rolled back over and closed my eyes to try and sleep, all the while still hearing kids' voices and walking around through the wall. And then the thing that almost made me shit my pants happened. Everything went quiet. And then I heard what sounded like a little boy's voice yell distinctly, "Derek!" I did the thing where my entire body went cold, then hot. My eyes shot open and I froze like a statue. Then I bravely hid under the covers until I eventually fell asleep. The next morning I waited until we were packed and out of the building before I told Derek what happened. He was not a big believer, to be fair, and looked pretty confused. When I asked him why, he said, "Babe, there wasn't a staircase next to our room. There wasn't even a room next to us on that side. It was a utility closet." I stood there for about a minute just freaking the fuck out. I asked him if he had heard anything and he said no and just shrugged it off. How, I don't know, because if you told me you heard a ghost kid yell my name in the middle of the night, I'd be losing it. Anyway, I haven't stayed there again since, but part of me is both excited and terrified to see if anything else were to happen there if I did. Well, I feel like if you were my kid, I'd be using you as some sort of detector. I'd sell you to a paranormal TV show like Ghost Adventures, and I'd say put her in a little cage like a canary, bring her into a room, and she'll be able to sense things and tell you things about what she's sensing, okay? Just trying to imagine your poor ma coming home and and you're going, "Oh, I'm not going back inside because Charlie's in there." She must have actually thought there is somebody in the house and I am going to have to go and face this. God bless her, because that must have been terrifying. And I am really sorry about the loss of your cousin. Trying to come to terms with a sudden death of somebody so young is absolutely heartbreaking and confusing and terrifying and life-changing and all of those things. And here's something I think is interesting. It is interesting, first of all, that you mentioned that your family are an Irish-American family. The second thing that's interesting is that I've heard a similar story in relation to the Banshee, where a family who had a Banshee attached to their family had a family member who passed away in another country in a motorcycle accident, and instead of hearing the scream of the Banshee at the time of the death, the two members of the family were in bed and they heard a motorcycle drive through their bedroom, and then got the phone call to say that their loved one had passed away in a motorcycle accident. Now look, it might not be that at all. It might just be a weird synchronicity, a connection between your family. And even that story that I read that seemed to be related to Banshee lore, that might not even be related to Banshee lore at all. But I've definitely read about this type of thing happening before. And I do think the right thing to do in terms of your dream about Craig is to not overthink it. Don't try and think, is it really him communicating with me? What matters is how it made you feel. Did it bring you comfort? Did it bring you healing? Did it bring you joy? Then yes, it did. And that's what matters. And in regards to your question about having the Fae, so as far as my understanding goes, the Fae isn't actually an Irish term. Irish understanding of fairy lore would not refer to them as the Fae. They're referred to as like fairies, the Sidhe, the good folk, etc., the shining folk, the shining people. There's lots of different terms for them, but the Fae seems to be a kind of relatively modern, possibly Americanized term for fairies and fairy lore. And I've never heard of anybody referring to kind of unexplained events as having the Fae. We would say that somebody who was maybe eccentric or a bit odd, we would say they are away with the fairies. That would be a way that we would describe them. I don't know if that's like a general universal term, potentially is, I don't know. But we would say away with the fairies, but that's if someone is a bit odd or a bit eccentric, not necessarily for unexplained events that are happening. And in terms of people with like unexplained abilities, or, you know, people doing spooky kid stuff, we would say like that they have the knowing or they have the gift of sight. But having the Fae is definitely not a term that I've come across in any of my fairy adventures over the years. And as somebody who in later years of their life has developed crippling insomnia, the idea of Derek falling asleep within 30 seconds and staying asleep brings me raging jealousy. And look, on the theme of The Shining, maybe that's what it is. Maybe you've got the shinning. Maybe you've got the shining and you were feeling these, like, you know, past ghosts of children running up and down those stairs and connecting with your boyfriend. And it is not something that I would like to experience, to be honest. Although I will say, go back to the hotel. Go on, do it for the plot. Do it for the story. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Sarah and Jess for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from October the 16th, 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.